Case 1. Michael Shaver. Michael Shaver and Lori were middle school sweethearts from upstate New York, two kids who had known each other since before they knew who they'd grow up to be. They married, moved south to Clermont, Florida, and built a life on 5 rural acres, raising 2 children together. Michael worked as a monorail technician at Walt Disney World, steady, dependable, the kind of man who showed up. And in his own time, he chased the thing that lit him up, racing airplanes with a local flight team called Precious Metal. His sister remembered him happiest out on the airfield, in a whole different zone, she said, whenever he was working on that plane. On November 7th, 2015, Michael, 33 years old, went to a local tractor show with his family and a coworker. The coworker noticed a quiet tension between Michael and Lori that day and thought little of it at the time. Until the following week, when Michael simply stopped coming to work. 3 days, no call, no word. He was never seen again. To everyone who asked, Lori had an answer. He'd left, walked out on the family, run off, started a new life somewhere else. And for more than 2 years, the proof kept arriving. Texts from Michael's phone, posts from Michael's Facebook, messages telling friends and family to stop worrying and leave him be. But something never fit. No one ever actually saw him. He never came for his children. His bank accounts had gone silent the very week he disappeared. Because every one of those messages was being written by the wife he had supposedly left behind, speaking in a dead man's voice for 2 years to keep the world from looking. And in the time that lie bought her, Lori poured a concrete slab and a fire pit in the backyard, with the new partner she would go on to build a life with, on the very ground where Michael lay. She even etched their initials into the concrete above him. The illusion finally cracked in February 2018, when a childhood friend who hadn't heard from Michael in years asked deputies for a welfare check. At the property, investigators noticed something wrong near the fire pit, a depression in the slab, roughly the size of a human body. They returned with a search warrant, excavation equipment, and cadaver dogs. 3 feet down, wrapped in a sheet, they found Michael. He had been shot once in the back of the head. The trial, in 2024, brought a defense as painful as the crime itself. Lori's teenage daughter took the stand and testified that she, as a small child, had taken her mother's gun and fired the shot to protect her mom. Prosecutors told the jury the truth was colder and simpler. 1 wound, 1 shooter, bank records that froze the week Michael died, and a wife who had spent 2 years impersonating her husband. They argued she had drawn her own daughter into the lie. The jury deliberated less than 4 hours. Guilty of second-degree murder, Lori Shaver was sentenced to life. Here is what Michael's case leaves us with. When someone disappears, and the only sign they are alive is a message on a screen, that is not proof of life. It is a voice we can no longer verify. The people who loved Michael were told, again and again, to stop looking. One friend refused. That single welfare check is the reason he was found, and the reason his children finally learned the truth. If someone you love goes quiet, and the reassurances feel wrong, trust that feeling. Sometimes a knock on a door is the only thing standing between a lie and the truth. Case 2. Charles Singer. Charles Singer, the people who knew him called him Butch, was 48 years old, living with his wife Dorothy on a rural property in the west of Flagler County, Florida. Charles was legally blind and disabled. He depended on the people around him, and most of all, on the woman he had married. In February 2017, Charles quietly disappeared. And for 2 months, no one raised the alarm, because the one person who should have said nothing at all, Dorothy, never reported her husband missing. When people asked, she had answers. He'd gone to Georgia, he was working out of state, he had left her. She kept using his bank cards. She sent messages from his phone. But the story only had to hold until someone who loved Charles started asking the right questions. In late March, it was his sister who finally filed a missing persons report. When detectives came to the property, something was wrong in the backyard. A pile of brush, an overturned John boat where no boat should be, and the faint, deliberate smell of mothballs, scattered, investigators would learn, to hide something worse. Beneath it all, they found Charles, wrapped and buried in a shallow grave on his own land. When they traced Dorothy's recent purchases, the receipts told their own story. She had been buying the very materials used to conceal his body. Confronted, Dorothy finally admitted she had shot him. But she called it self-defense, a struggle outside, near the hog pen, after Charles turned on her and threatened her life. There was just one problem. Investigators found Charles's blood inside the house, on the headboard of the couple's bed. Not outside, not by the pen, in the bedroom where a legally blind, disabled man would have been at his most defenseless. Her story and the evidence could not both be true. A jury convicted Dorothy Singer of first-degree murder. But the case wasn't finished. An appeals court found her defense had been given just 12 days to examine that complex, last-minute DNA evidence, nowhere near enough, and ordered a new trial. Rather than face a second jury, Dorothy pleaded guilty in 2020 to second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 32.5 years. Charles Singer's case leaves us with two lessons, and both matter. The first is about evidence. A story can be rehearsed and repeated until it sounds like truth, but blood does not move to fit a narrative. Where it falls, and where a body comes to rest, keep their own quiet record, and it outlasts the lie. The second is about silence. For 2 months, no one reported Charles gone, because the person closest to him made sure the questions never started. He was found because one family member refused to believe a man simply vanishes. When someone vulnerable goes quiet, someone who depends on others just to be seen, that quiet deserves to be questioned, not explained away. Charles deserved to be looked for, and in the end, he deserved the truth too. Case 3. Doug Benefield. Doug Benefield had already lived a full life by the time he met Ashley. Born in California, raised in Alabama, he went to Texas A&M and then served as a naval flight officer. He was a father and a widower, a man who had already buried one wife and knew what it was to lose. In the summer of 2016, at 54, he met a 24-year-old ballerina named Ashley. 13 days later, they were married. It moved fast, and it came apart faster. Together, they founded a ballet company that folded within months. When Ashley became pregnant, she moved to Florida with her mother, and the marriage curdled into something bitter. This was not a happy home. There were fights, and on at least one occasion, Doug fired a gun into the ceiling during an argument, later telling a friend it was the dumbest thing he had ever done. But when their daughter was born, Ashley asked for full custody and cut Doug off from his child. What followed was years of legal war, Ashley filing complaint after complaint, accusing Doug of being controlling, abusive, even of trying to poison her. Again and again, the family court examined those claims, and again, a judge found they did not hold, ruling her allegations lacked, in the court's words, even a scintilla of credibility, and granting Doug the right to see his daughter. By September 2020, Ashley was preparing to move away to Maryland. And in a detail that makes the ending harder to bear, Doug was helping her do it. Still in love with her, still hoping to hold the family together, he came to help load the moving truck. Ashley's mother took their little girl to a park. For a few minutes, Doug and Ashley were alone. A neighbor heard screaming. Then Ashley was at that neighbor's door, a gun in her hand, saying she had shot her husband. Doug had been shot twice. He died an hour later. Ashley said it was self-defense, that Doug had assaulted her, and she feared for her life. The media called it the Black Swan case, after the ballet. But before the trial even began, a judge ruled on her self-defense claim and found she was not justified in using deadly force. At trial, Doug's own daughter testified she had never once seen him threaten or hurt Ashley. Prosecutors argued Ashley had wanted one thing, sole custody, and was willing to win it at any cost. The jury did not accept self-defense, but they did not call it cold, premeditated murder either. They convicted her of manslaughter. In December 2024, she was sentenced to 20 years, followed by 10 years of probation. Doug Benefield's case sits on the hardest ground of all, and it deserves an honest lesson. Abuse is real. People who fear for their safety deserve to be believed and helped. That must never be in doubt, and it isn't here. But belief and evidence still have to meet. Here, over years and across many hearings, the courts weighed her claims and found the proof simply wasn't there. What the case shows most clearly is where the danger lived. Not in the marriage, but in the leaving, in the custody fight, in the moment one parent became determined the other would be gone. That is so often when these tragedies happen. Doug died helping the woman he loved move away from him. He deserved to watch his daughter grow up. He deserved, at the very least, the truth. Case 4. Lanny Horwitz. Lanny Horwitz and Donna were high school sweethearts. They married in 1967, barely out of their teens, left Buffalo, New York, and built a life in Jupiter, Florida, where Lanny became a successful real estate developer. By any outside measure, they had everything: sailboats, airplanes, travel around the world, a son, Radley, and a home in one of the most exclusive gated communities in the state. But their marriage was a door that never fully closed. They divorced, remarried, divorced again. And by 2011, though legally divorced, Lanny and Donna were living under the same roof once more, alongside their grown son. What Donna could not live with was someone else. Lanny had grown close to a business associate named Francine, close enough that Donna, who had even persuaded her own mother to lend Lanny $200,000, filled the pages of a private diary with her heartbreak and her fury, calling him cruel, calling him cold. And on the morning of September 30th, 2011, Lanny was preparing to leave, to travel to North Carolina with Francine. Donna had found out only hours before. That morning, alarms began sounding at the Horwitz home. A private security guard arrived to find Lanny dead in the running shower. And from the moment responders came through the door, Donna pushed one story, telling them over and over that Lanny had done this to himself because of how awful he had been. Their son said he had woken to the sound of gunfire. But a detective took one look at the scene and stopped everyone in the room. This was no self-inflicted death. It had been staged to look like one, and the staging did not hold. The blood told investigators that Lanny had been reaching for the phone, not the act of a man ending his own life. There was a bullet hole through the towel draped over the shower door, its burn marks on the outside, meaning the shots had come from beyond the glass, not within it. And he had been shot far more times than any such story could explain. Suspicion fell on the only two people in the house, Donna and their son. But gunshot residue tests and his own account cleared Radley. What sealed the case against Donna was her own hand, the diary, and the jealousy written across its pages. Her defense pointed at her son. A jury didn't believe it. Donna Horwitz was convicted, and when an appeals court overturned that first verdict on a legal error, she was tried again in 2017 and convicted a second time of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 32 years. Her son testified against her both times. They have not spoken since. Lanny Horwitz's case teaches something investigators live by, and the rest of us should remember. A death can be staged, a scene can be arranged to tell a lie, but a staged death leaves seams, the blood that moves the wrong way, the burn mark on the wrong side of the cloth, the detail that refuses to fit the story. The truth of how a person died is written into the room itself, and it is remarkably hard to erase. And there is a harder truth beneath this one. Heartbreak is real, and it can be devastating. But heartbreak is never permission. As one attorney put it, you cannot kill the person who broke your heart. Lanny deserved to walk out that door. He deserved to be remembered as more than the scene someone tried to make of him. 4 Florida marriages, 4 husbands, 4 women who told the world a story, and 4 times the truth refused to stay buried. Michael Shaver, hidden beneath a fire pit while his own voice was faked to keep the search away. Charles Singer, a blind and trusting man, laid in a shallow grave while his wife spent his money and spoke in his name. Doug Benefield, a father who came to help the woman he loved move away and never left that house alive. Lanny Horwitz, made to look responsible for an ending he never chose. What connects them isn't the weapon, or the county, or the sentence. It's the lie, and the quiet, patient things that undid it every time. A friend who wouldn't stop asking, a sister who filed the report no one else would, blood that kept its own record, a scene that would not match the script. The evidence does not grieve, and it cannot be talked out of the truth, but it can hand that truth back to the people left behind. And it is those people we think of first. The children who lost a father and, in the same breath, the trust that should have protected them. The parents who buried a son they raised. The brothers and sisters who spent years asking where their sibling had gone and found the courage to sit through the answer. To every family who carried these losses, who waited and grieved and stayed, this series is, above all, for you. We also want to name the ones who refused to look away. The detectives who saw a depression in the concrete and did not accept a shrug. The crime scene analysts who read the blood, the towel, the trajectory, and let the physical truth speak. The forensic teams whose patient work turned a missing person file into a murder case and a cover story into a conviction. And the courts, the prosecutors who carried the weight of proof, the defense attorneys who held the system to its burden, the judges and the jurors who weighed it all with care. Because justice is not a single moment. It is the sum of many people choosing, quietly, to do the work right. These 4 men were more than the cases they became. They were fathers and husbands, sons and friends, people with airplanes and jobs and ordinary mornings that should have kept coming. They can no longer benefit from being seen clearly. The rest of us still can. If you are in a relationship that frightens you, especially if you are trying to leave, because leaving is so often the most dangerous moment, please reach out. Help is confidential and available, and you will find the number in the description below. To the families still carrying these losses, may you find peace and truth and the room to heal. To everyone who worked to answer for these men, thank you. And to you, for sitting with these stories, thank you for remembering the names we said.